All right, so now we're on to another topic. This is the topic of supply and demand. And whether or not you know how it works, it has a huge impact on your life because it impacts every single price of every single good and service that you purchase. So let's dive in. So, supply and demand is kind of tricky. It describes the relationship between how much of a product or service is available compared to how much people have a desire or demand for said product or service. So, supply is the amount of an available thing or service, and demand is the desire for a thing or service that people can obtain. And these two factors play a huge role in the price of just about everything: the rent that you pay, how much you pay for a house, how much you pay for food, the electronics that you purchase, membership subscriptions to things such as Netflix. All these different things play a huge role in how every other item is priced. And it also impacts how much you earn if you work for a business. Because what they're willing to pay you per hour is a huge factor of how much do they want you to work versus how much work is available. An employee, if an employer can't find, qualified workers, what do? They offer more money. But if there are, a line of 150 people out the door to try to apply for a job, they don't have to offer more money because the competition to work there is already existing. So let's dive into this and keep pushing forward. Key ideas: an increase in demand can increase the price of things, right? Because if more people want something, they're going to pay more money for it. A decrease in demand can decrease the price of things. If all of a sudden people don't want this item, it sits on the shelf in the store, or if you're trying to sell it or something like that, and sometimes it'll go on sale or on clearance, or you'll try to lower the price a little bit to see if you can find someone to buy it. If there's an increase in supply, it can also decrease the price of things, because if everyone can get it, why would anybody try to compete and offer more money for it? And also, a decrease in supply can increase the price of things. If all of a sudden something gets more difficult to find or obtain, like toilet paper or hand sanitizer during a pandemic, well, yeah, that can increase the price because people will buy it all up and try to resell it for a profit, which during a pandemic is kind of immoral, but we've heard about it in the news here and there, and it's kind of wild. So there's a really popular chart that people use. This chart can give us some insights on how this supply and demand system works, and we actually have two graphs fused into one. And we can see that there's a demand curve and a supply curve. So as the quantity of an item increases, as we have more and more of them, people become less demanding of it, right? They don't desire it as much because everyone who wants one can usually get one. But on the other side, as the price increases, that also increases or encourages people to keep creating supplies. For example, if corn sells for $1 each, you're going to have a bunch of farmers who are going to drop everything that they're doing and produce as much corn as they can because that's a really, really good price for farmers to sell the corn at. So when these two graphs fuse or intersect or meet at a specific point, we get something called a market clearing price or a fair market price, which basically says, given the supply, how much is available, and the demand, how much people want or desire it, we're going to find this happy medium right in the center where as you make or produce these items, they get sold and people like to purchase them. And that's how you find fair prices for a lot of different things. So, like we said, on the supply side, the higher the price, the more people will want to offer the good or service. And on the demand side, the more an item exists, the less demand there will be for it since it is so common. And where they intersect makes that fair market price. All right, so let's look at some examples. If you know anyone who's lived in New York City, they will tell you that the price to live there is astronomical. It is crazy expensive to live in New York City, specifically Manhattan. So taking a look at this, right, we have rent in New York City is $3,500 per month, but a similarly sized apartment in Ellenville is $1,250 per month. Why is there such a huge difference? That is almost triple the rent price. So the main explanations that people can give is, more people probably want to or specifically need to live in the city for potential jobs or just the life experience of living in a city. It's definitely a pretty cool experience. A lot of people love it. A lot of people decide to live there for a very long time. Some people even live there their whole life. So it's pretty cool. In case you have a specific job with a specific set of skills, it's going to be harder to find an employer who will pay you for those skills if you're in a smaller town. But at the same time, if you have a specific set of skills, you can make a large amount of money living in New York City. There's also limited space. If you notice these apartments in the picture, they're stacked vertically. In smaller towns, you can rent an entire house for cheaper than an apartment, and you also have access to a huge backyard and peace and quiet and all these different other features. So it's a trade-off, but yeah, there's less space in New York City than in most major towns, so they're going to charge more for rent because of demand, and there's a lack of supply of area to live in. So we're going to break it down into a few different examples. The first one is the supply and demand in New York City for living spaces. So rent or apartments or a house or whatever else you want to call it. On the left-hand side, we have the supply and demand. And on the top, we have increases and decreases. So in this first square, if supply increases, we're going to go over those ideas. The next one, if supply decreases, we're going to go over there. And on the bottom ones, if demand increases, we'll look at that. And if demand decreases, we'll look at that. So let's look at this first one. The number of apartments increases. So let's say new buildings are established and built and things like that. The number of apartments increase, there's more places to live, there's more options for people to choose from. And landlords start getting a little nervous. They're like, uh-oh, I have all these apartments in these living spaces, and I have to have someone living in here for me to collect rent. What if I offered $100 less per month? Maybe I can guarantee someone to rent this apartment. Then all of a sudden, all the landlords start doing that because they want to compete, right? No one's going to go to an apartment that costs $100, $200, or $300 more a month if they offer the same luxuries and the same, style and quality. So then they all compete, and they call this a race to the bottom, where they keep decreasing their prices to try to attract new renters. So as a result, the rent cost would likely go down. On the other side, on the decreasing section, if supply decreases, meaning the number of apartments decreases, well, people have less options. Instead of you looking at 20 different apartments in a week, you only have an option to look at 3 available ones. And you realize also that there's over 100 people looking at each of those 3 available apartments. So what do? Maybe you want to compete with other people and say, you know what, I'm going to give you an extra $100 a month to live here because I know it's really hard to find apartments. I'm just going to give you extra, hopefully you'll choose me. And maybe the other potential renters do the same thing. So in this situation, they're competing and rent prices will likely go up. On the bottom, we have demand increasing, so more people want to live in apartments. There's less options, just like before, right? Because more people are grabbing apartments, less people are moving out, people are staying put, and you have hundreds of people looking at maybe 20 different apartments that exist. Renters might have to pay more, again, because it's limited spaces. Landlords can even look at this situation and say, you know what, everyone wants to live here. I'm going to increase my rent by $100 a month. No, you know what, I'm going to go $200 a month because I know people are going to get desperate and someone's going to pay me for that. So in that case, when demand increases, rent goes up. And finally, in the last square, the demand for apartments increases. Less people want to live there. So the demand for apartments decreases. Maybe like a pandemic, people don't want to be living too close to each other. And there is an increase in supply, right? Because people are moving out, people are leaving, less people are taking available apartments. And we refer back to the situation up here where the supply increases. So it's kind of weird, they kind of make like this diagonal system where like the diagonals on one side have similar ideas to diagonals on the other side. And that's pretty interesting for this. Let's look at another example. All right, seasonal food. When you want to grab certain types of food throughout the year, You may notice that some items are really, really cheap during certain times of the year, but then other times of the year when you're trying to get it, it may be unavailable or it might be way too expensive. Some examples, strawberries get pretty expensive in the winter because that's usually a summer type of berry. Corn becomes extremely cheap in the summer because corn just grows in the sun and the heat and loves it, and that's one of our major staples in this country. Foods that only grow in certain seasons can be more expensive during those off seasons, right? If corn is cheap in the summer, what about in the wintertime? Corn can be kind of difficult to obtain, and it might be even more expensive as a result. And even things like diet trends can impact how grocery prices change. Because if everyone's trying to buy spinach, because of some new trendy diet that tells you to put spinach in everything, spinach is going to get hard to come across because people keep buying it and using it. So even things like trends or social events or things like that can play a huge role in supply and demand prices. Let's take a look. We have an example here of grocery prices. So again, same idea with the squares. Upper left, our supply increases, so a great harvest yields tons of corn. So farmers have more corn than they know what to do with. Grocery stores might be left with extra corn because, okay, there's a lot more. There's twice as much corn, but no one's buying it. So what do grocery stores have to do? They have to decrease their prices so it encourages customers to buy more of it. If corn is 50 cents each and, there's tons of it, there are literally like heaping piles of it being put out in the grocery store and they can't get rid of it, I might not buy it for 50 cents. But if they drop it down to 30 cents or 25 cents or even 20 cents, I might buy some of that because that's cheap enough for me to figure out something to do with it. On the upper right, if supply decreases, a drought, a lack of rain, lack of water, ruins the strawberry harvest for this year. All right, since there are less strawberries, they're becoming rare. People still want strawberries just as much, and they're sold out within 1 hour of the grocery store opening every single day. So the grocery store looks at this and says, I think we need to increase our prices. We're gonna, increase the price by 10 or 20%. Instead of strawberries being $4 a box, let's make it $5 or $6 a box and see what happens. And if people are desperate for strawberries, they're still gonna pay that, and the grocery store makes more money from that. So why not? All right, but you also got to realize the supplier to the grocery store also will likely increase their prices. So you got to make sure that the grocery store also makes money on this. On the bottom left, we have demand increasing. Grapes all of a sudden become a trendy snack. Everyone wants to eat grapes. Grapes are good for you. Grapes are great. They're a nice, healthy fruit. You can freeze them. You can use them as ice cubes to flavor your water. It's some cool stuff. I love grapes. They're a nice little snack. But people are buying up grapes like crazy because there's some new diet or trendy thing. The grocery store can't even keep up with the demand. Again, look at the diagonals, right? This bottom left is somehow related to the upper right. Grocery store can't keep up with the demand. Grapes are sold out within 1 hour of opening. The grocery store raises prices and people still buy them. And finally, on the bottom right, demand decreases. So all of a sudden, scientists come out to the public and say, you shouldn't eat a lot of carrots. I don't know. Carrots are good for you. You should eat them. But let's say for some reason carrots become something that people want to avoid. Or they say only eat carrots once a week. Or, eat half as many carrots as you normally do. If carrots are linked to health issues or things like that, people might stop buying them as much. So again, think about the diagonals. The grocery stores might be left with extra carrots that spoil or go bad. So what do? They decrease the price in the hopes that people will still buy them. People are there and be like, I don't really want carrots, but they're so cheap. Let's buy a little bit. It's fine. So again, this is how these type of situations work. We have one more example to look at, vacations. And I'm going to put myself at the beach on vacation. Vacations are fun, and maybe you've noticed that the timing of the vacation is super, super important. I'm a teacher, so I have very specific types of breaks, right? Spring break, winter break, things like that. If I want to go on a vacation during those times, it's going to be very expensive because everyone else has off, for families and kids and people in school. So it's going to become kind of expensive for me to go on those types of trips because everyone else is trying to do it. Some examples: if you want to take a vacation down to Florida during spring break, crazy expensive. Maybe you want to take a trip up to Canada in the winter. Who would do that? Canada is freezing cold, and in the wintertime, it's going to be even colder. That's going to be a cheap vacation. Vacation in Europe in the summer, very expensive. Everyone likes going to Europe in the summer because it's nice, it's hot, it's beautiful weather, doesn't rain as often. It's just, there's things to do, everyone seems lively, stuff like that. And also the idea, anyone wants to go on a vacation anywhere during a pandemic, it's going to be dirt cheap. Flights to Europe were like $400 when they're normally like $1,800. So that's kind of wild as well. Let's break it down into our squares. All right, so we have vacations on the upper left if the supply increases. So a new country is expanding their tourism. They open up new beaches, they open things up to tourists, whatever it is. With more choices, travelers can be more picky where they want to go. You know, do I want to go to this place, or this new place, or this other new place? There's so many different options that I can do. Hotels, airlines, and industries have to lower their prices to make their destination more appealing. You know, even if you're an established tourist zone, if there's a new trendy place opening, you still have to compete with the people who want to go or to the vacation spots that are over there. You have to encourage the people to want to come to your hotel or to fly to your area or things like that. So the price of a vacation likely goes down. On the upper right, as supply decreases, let's say a natural disaster, a flood, a hurricane, a tornado, natural forest fires, whatever happens, ruins a tourist destination. Well, there's less places to stay, but the same number of people still want to travel. So what happens? Hotels, airlines, all these different places say, you know what, everyone's trying to fly or go to other places. I think we need to increase our prices because we have a limited supply. And the price of a vacation goes up. On the bottom left, the demand increasing. So a country becomes a trendy destination, you know, Iceland or something like that becomes a really cool place where everybody wants to go to. Well, everyone wants to visit here. There's a limited number of flights and hotels available, though. So what do? Hotels and airlines are going to charge more money because more people are like waiting in line to try to do that kind of stuff. So why not make it more expensive? Claim some more profit. And as a result, the price of a vacation goes up. And on the bottom right, let's say we have demand decreasing. A pandemic makes travel more dangerous. Yeah, that would do it. People do not want to travel due to these type of risks. So hotels and airlines now have rooms and airplane seats that are completely empty. So what do? They got to make it more attractive. They keep decreasing their price over and over again. And they try to make travel as appealing as they can. And as a result, the price of a vacation goes down. So that's kind of the idea of supply and demand. There's a lot more other factors attached to it, but this is the general idea, right? We notice that as certain supply or certain demands increase or decrease, they tend to impact the price of things. But the other thing we didn't really talk about is these impacts have impacts on other types of areas. So, for example, if a natural disaster ruins a tourist destination, right, the price of a vacation is going to go up because you got to go to other places. What happens? It gives the incentive or the encouragement for other locations to try to get their stuff together to try to like open up a vacation or tourist destination as soon as possible. You know, if all of a sudden people, or even like we have, you know, an increase in demand to go on vacation, you may see a lot of these entrepreneurs and business people trying to build more hotels. Oh, everyone wants to go here and it keeps increasing. Why don't we just build a hotel so we can capture some of that demand? So there's a lot of different moving gears and pieces within this like economic model of supply and demand and how this all works. But I hope this kind of gave you some insights of, you know, prices aren't just prices because. Usually prices end up happening through this type of fair market action. There are things such as manipulation and, you know, items like that, but for the most part, the prices tend to balance out over time. So this is also just interesting or important to be a smart consumer about it. You know, when certain opportunities make themselves available, for example, if a new country is expanding their tourism and prices decrease, maybe you want to, try to be adventurous and take that opportunity, or wait until all the other local areas try to drop their prices because that new place is the super exciting place to be. So there's a lot, and I mean a lot of moving parts in this. But I think we're all a little bit smarter as a result, and yeah, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask them. Leave them in the YouTube video if you want, or if you're one of my students, leave them in Google Classroom. Don't be afraid to ask me these different types of questions because I'm always happy to help with that. All right, thanks for your attention, and I hope you learned a little bit today.